I hear from Helen and Aaron, who have got really interesting insights into the current exhibition that's going on at Kettle's Yard in Cambridge, but also the really interesting story about our artist friend who was based in Banks, in the 70s, I think it was. So we're going to hear some insights into that and see some lovely images from that. And here, Helen made a beautiful film. We're going to see a little insight, a little clip of the film that Helen made a few years ago as well. So really interesting insight into that. And then Celia has been working alongside the lovely Dolly and Brian at the Shipping Brow Gallery in Maryport on a really fantastic children's project. Some lovely images from that to come as well. Again, I went down to the Shipping Brow Project Gallery on Sunday in Maryport, just after it had opened. If you get a chance to go there, they've done a fantastic job. Lots of Mitchell paintings everywhere, lots of Percy Kelly drawings as well. Plus, I met Felix, who's the artist in residence there, who we're going to get on one of these calls probably in the new year. And there's a lovely exhibition downstairs as well, which will be changing with the seasons. So really a great offer at the Shipping Brow Gallery in Maryport if you get a chance to go down there. It looks beautiful as well, sort of bright blue set on the corner near the harbour front there. Looks fantastic. So credit to them. And also, I think, to Cumberland Council, who have helped back it and helped with the building work as well. So that is the plan for this morning. So we're going to kick off. Chip in at any time in chat. And we'll have, time for questions for all of our guests this morning as well. So, this is very much an inclusive and hopefully interactive session as well. Right, Patch Middleton.
Hello.
Hello. Nice to have you with us.
Thank
Tell
you.
us a bit about yourself, where you're from, what you do, and then I'll interrogate you fiercely with a few questions and then throw it open to the floor.
So my name is Patch Middleton. I'm a writer and a sound designer. I was born in Whitehaven, but then fled east to the Eden Valley, which is where I'm now living. I am mainly interested in work that's to do with landscape and folklore, sort of the strange and fantastical, and how that relates to very local identity. But very weirdly, one of the big shows that I've been doing recently has been a cowboy noir fever dream set in the Mojave Desert in Nevada, outside Las Vegas.
Fever dream, did you say?
Yeah, it's been described in our copy. I wish I could take credit for coming up with that phrase, but it wasn't me. But it was a cowboy noir fever dream, which when people read that before seeing the show, they go, I don't really know what that means. And then they see the show and go, all right, okay, no, that's the only way you could describe it. And that's called Ghost of the Near Future, which is a show that's coming to Theatre by the Lake on Tuesday. I think there are still tickets available for anyone's interested. It is a mix and mash of storytelling, micro-cinema, which is where we get like a tiny little CCTV camera that we use, and we put it very, very close to things and blow it up large on a big screen. Lots of sound design. It has some sort of, it's all devised with a group. There's 4 of us together. A lady from California, a gent from sort of near Portsmouth down south, and then myself and a scenographer. And we all came together, brains in a room, creating this show that was mainly inspired by Emma, who's from California's, into her relationship to the landscape of the desert outside Las Vegas.
And so what's your role in all of this production in particular?
I've done all the sound and music, and I was also co-deviser, so I've had a hand in writing a lot of it as well.
Okay, so what's been your journey from, where were you born? Whitehaven, I think you said, to doing what you're doing? You went to school in Cumbria? And
I did. I went to Queen Elizabeth Grammar School in Penrith, and had some fantastic drama teachers, Dawn and Sian, who, if anyone knows them, will know how fantastic they are, and feeling very lucky in the way that they were very deviser focused from the off, which isn't entirely common from what I've spoken to a lot of people who've done drama at school. A lot of people is very much script in hand and analysis, which is great, and I love doing that. But Dawn and Sian's way of doing things was very inspired by sort of very deviser-led theatre companies. So it's very much just sort of making in the room, generating content, doing things with body, with space, with voice, that sort of thing, which kind of then helped me leapfrog into the stuff that I'm doing now.
And so was there a little cohort of people from that class, as it were, that have ended up doing dramatic things, or were you the only one that sort of made it through that way?
There was a lot more of us. There's quite a lot of people gone into technical. There's quite a few people who are working in lights, and sort of a more stage manager side. There is a friend of mine who lives in Manchester, she makes musicals every year. So she's doing a lot of stuff. So there is a surprising amount compared to, I think there was, by the end of the A level, there's about 16 of us, and I'd say about 10 are still working in the arts.
That's not bad, is it?
It's not too bad, especially based on the fact that in the middle of that we had a pandemic in our early careers, that where we basically graduated, had a year, and then graduated from university. If we went to university, had a year, and then it was pandemic. So it's been a challenge to sort of get the career off the ground. But there's a lot of us that are still giving it a good go.
And what about, I think you're in Plumpton this morning, but
I am.
A big issue that not resonates, but comes around again and again. Ever since I've been involved in sort of discussing and talking about the arts and culture in Cumbria is the whole, how do you keep young people from doing their education perhaps in Cumbria and then going away and not kind of working in Cumbria? How do we? So you've obviously had to go away to do your work, or do you do a bit of it in Cumbria, or how does that work out for you?
Most of the work that I've done in Cumbria has been stuff that I've had to sort of be the driving force behind. It's been at the moment. Me and my theatre company, we did an ACE funded audio walking ghost story with Theatre by the Lake helping us back in 2021, where you went for a walk around Derwentwater and would listen to a ghost story that was about local history, a very specific story of the village that was filled up by the reservoir, and then relating it to a story of a bride who was drowned, which is a piece of local folklore. A bride was drowned on the night of her wedding, so that her newly wealthy husband could run away with all of her money, and then relating that to the story of the Manchester Corporation filling the reservoir, to basically using Cumbrian resources in a very cynical way to then take out and to leave the county with that money. So that was kind of the theme of that. And then we just put in another Arts Council bid at the moment to do some work on the west coast of Cumbria, where I was born, which is a very sort of high concept piece, working with Rosehill Theatre, hopefully, if we get this funding, that's about nuclear power. It's a musical, a sea shanty musical about Sellafield and nuclear power.
That sells it already, a sea shanty musical about Sellafield.
Yes, and it's called A Shanty for an Atomic Town. As you can see from the way I've described the pieces, I work in quite weird and high concept stuff. But basically, a lot of the work that I've done in Cumbria has been stuff that I've had to sort of do, sort of have a hand in being the driving force behind. Whereas a lot of the work projects that I get involved in are stuff in London, Liverpool, Manchester, in Yorkshire. Those are the things that I would apply for, which then bring me out of Cumbria, rather than actually having sort of that, applying for a lot of stuff here. Because I don't know if you know about Open Hire, which is sort of like it's a weekly email thread that puts out all the jobs of people who are involved in that thread at the moment. So it's none of them are acting. It's all technical stuff. It's writing, music, lights, directing, stage managing, things like that. And every week I get an email in with all these projects saying, like, we need this person for this person. We need this person for this person. And I think I've seen a Cumbrian job once on that entire, in the year and a half that I've been part of that. Because I'm obviously always having half an eye.
Yeah. And just tell me a bit more about the world of a sound designer.
Basically, one of the big other things that I wrangle with at the moment is that when you work in sound and lights, it's very easy for projects to bring you in right at the end. They have a whole project, and we're working on it for 2 years, and then we bring me in, and it's like, we're doing a show in 4 weeks. Can you, catch up to here? Can you read all this script? We've all been in the same room doing this for ages, and we're going to bring you in right at the end to do some sound that is representative of all this work that we've done already. So a lot of it has been sort of you kind of like playing a lot of catch up. You're being brought into the room. Obviously, with the nature of COVID and stuff like that, there's a lot of stuff that's been out of the room as well. It's a lot of going out into nature with my microphone. I've got a little Zoom mic that I use. I like to use people's voices, stretch them, do things on my computer. I've got a little keyboard. It's a lot of fun, really, because it's basically you being in a room and adding that extra level. But then you get certain projects like with Ghost in the Near Future, where I was brought on as a sound designer from the off back in 2021. So I've been doing that project for 2 years, and therefore the sound is so embedded in the project that when they started the project, they had 2 performers, which were the people who run the theatre company as well. So they were performer directors, me as a sound designer, and my friend Georgie as a sonographer. So it's basically all the visuals, all the sound, all the script and stuff like that was being thought about from the very genesis of the project, which has been the most rewarding way to work so far. So I've sort of been angling towards projects as much as I can that have at least somewhat of a, they sort of consider those other elements from the off as much as possible, because those have been the ones that I found the most satisfying.
Kate Brandrett, come off mute and ask your question that you've put in chat, which I don't fully understand.
Oh, just links to your projects, Patch.
I can send them.
Just to find out more, that'd be great. It sounds absolutely bonkers and brilliant and really inspiring.
Yeah, I'll send some links. I'll see if you can keep asking questions, Tom. I'll see if I can multitask.
I'll do that because I'm going to ask you a very difficult question now, which is tell us about the show on Tuesday. Give us a bit of a synopsis and why we should come and see it.
The basic synopsis is, in terms, if we could have characters in this, is that there is a magician going on a road trip through Las Vegas to perform the greatest disappearing act that the world has ever seen. And that greatest disappearing act may or may not be the end of the world. Basically, the show is about our relationship to, around the conceit of the fact that two things, that basically for the last 100 years, we've all been living essentially 1 minute to midnight. We had 2 world wars off the back of each other. We have had nuclear threats. We've had terrorism. We've had pandemics. We've had things like that where so when I was growing up, I was 6 when it was 9/11. When my mum was growing up, it was the threat of nuclear war during the Cold War. When my granddad was growing up, it was the Second World War. And now for children nowadays, it's a pandemic. And then the next one seems to be AI. And it's just, how does that work with the psychology of people who are trying to get up and walk to the shops and get milk, come home, read the news, something horrendous has happened, you go out on your day, you see friends, you read the news, that sort of thing. And we sort of viewed it as being, like trying to deal with that is like staring directly into the sun. And a lot of it's sort of in this environmental thing, that one of the real issues that they have with environmental progress is that people often don't want to think about it. We've got some serious issues with the fact that the environment is going to hell in a handbasket, and trying to wrangle with that and go, these are some really serious issues that are happening within the next few years. And if we don't make some decisions now, it's going to affect us, our children, their children, that sort of thing. And it's going to be a very real threat. But there's a lot of people, myself included, a lot of the time, that it feels like, how am I supposed to live with that and also do my normal day? And through that, we're telling that through a series of different vignettes. The main story is sort of like a framing device of this magician going to Las Vegas, but it muses on the environment and on sort of greed culture and money and that sort of thing. There are magic tricks. There's a big rabbit. There's cowboy standoffs, and then the last 25 minutes have no one speak. So it is a real ride. It's got a lot of projection, and it's sort of 95% of it has sound design behind it.
Okay. And this was on a run in the Barbican, I think, wasn't it, recently?
It was, yeah. Sorry, I've realised I've sent the Barbican one rather than the Theatre by the Lake one. I'll send the Theatre by the Lake one because the Barbican one's been and gone, so it's not as useful. Feel
free to pop the links in and Patch once we finish the chat. That's fine.
Yeah,
no problem at all. But how many nights did you do at the Barbican?
We did 3 nights down in the Pit Theatre, which is very thematically relevant since the Pit Theatre used to be a nuclear bunker. I don't know if anyone's been to the Pit Theatre in Barbican. You have to go down about 3 or 4 flights of stairs to get there, which was an extra bit of lovely. We then considered ourselves to be promenade theatre, even though we didn't have anything to do with that bit. But the idea that you had to then enter the building and walk down and down and down to be able to see our show about the end of the world, which involves nuclear bombs, felt very prevalent. Yeah, it was fantastic. In that version, we always used to joke about calling it the Barbican version before we even got the Barbican version of the show, where it was like, what would we do if we were going to dream big, if we had unlimited budget, if we were able to do what we want? The Barbican version, what would we do? And there's a lot of stuff that we're able to do in that version, which we've been wanting to do for a while. Like we were able to get pyro, which was very exciting. So we had some explosions on stage and some live fireworks and things, which I didn't warn my grandma about, which in hindsight, maybe I should have done when she came to see it, because she'd seen the show before and thought she knew what was going on, sat right at the front, apart from the rest of my family, which was a bizarre choice. But anyway, I was in the back operating the sound, so couldn't actually get down there to be like, Grandma, maybe you should move a few rows back. And I was just watching because I knew it was coming. And then she jumped out her skin.
Do you think you can make it, for the rest of your career doing what you're doing? Is it a sort of hand to mouth existence, or are you comfortable in?
I hope so. I have, yeah. I mean, my real worry is that I'm not very good at or enjoy doing anything else. So it's a bit more sort of it's either this or I'm gonna have to have some serious sort of long dark nights of the soul to work out what I'd want to do otherwise. So it's more been a sort of just a relentless kind of pursuit of doing this. I'm really comfortable picking up extra work on the side. I do work with I work with SEN kids in a primary school. And I do work around the country doing stuff like that to pick up extra bits and bobs of work as well if I need to fill up on money as well. But for the most part, for the last year, I've not had to do any of those shifts. So I have been able to, each time I feel like I'm getting quite towards the end of, don't really know what I'm doing next year. Sorry, my dog's just come in. I don't really know what I'm doing this, and I'm looking at February, I'm looking at May, and those are all empty. But by the time they come around, I've had emails, I've had irons in the fire, I've had projects coming my way. So at the moment, it is a bit Wallace and Gromit on the little train putting track in front of his car as it goes. But then everyone that I've spoken to who works in the industry, and I do know a lot of people who are at that sort of level higher than me, they do say that there's a certain turning point. There's something that clicks over and suddenly it feels very viable. And with the work that I'm doing at the moment, it feels like that I could be 2 or 3 years away from that, especially in sound design, where actually there's less of us, just by the nature of the beast. There's a lot of fantastic sound designers out there, but it seems like that there are less. There seems like there's less people applying for the sound design jobs than there would be the directing jobs at my level, and it seems to work all the way up. And then once, basically, as a sound designer, your trick is to find a director who you like and gets lots of work, and stick as close to them as you can with glue. And I'm basically trying to foster those relationships at the moment, because every time they get a project, they go, "Oh, I'll just get Patch on the phone." And then my general trend has been that I've been quite fun to work with, I hope, so that those directors will then tell their director mates, and they all know each other. So then, therefore, I just had an email this morning from a project I did 2 years ago that said, "Just had your email sent to me from this guy." And I would never have known that 2 years ago when I did this project that it might have led to work that I was doing in 2024 with a completely different set of people at a different theatre. So I guess it is about holding nerve. It is about trying to find space for my mental health and trying to look after myself, be healthy. There's a lot of sort of trying to make sure that you're not doing the grinds, because there's a real danger, I think, in the arts, especially when you're a freelancer, that if you're not productive all the time, and if you're not always working, then if you fail or if you don't get the things that you want to do, then it's entirely your fault. And I think that's a really unhealthy way of looking at it. You have to, I mean, I live in Cumbria, I have friends who live here. It's really helpful to go out and walk in the lakes, do some Wainwrights, walk on the fells, walk my dog, that sort of thing is really lovely. It's about sort of trying to, again, a bit like sort of how do you marry the end of the world with normal life? It's how do you marry the potential end of your career with normal life and still sort of keep pushing forward, being healthy, keeping walking and still being as productive as you can be. Is my rambled answer to that.
Well, as Lorna says, the Sellafield Sea Shanty musical, if that's what it is, I think it is, sounds great. If there was one thing, last question, Patch, if there was one thing that you want to change about sort of the cultural setup in Cumbria, what might that be?
Oh, I mean, gosh, I mean, one of the things is such a hard one because it's actually not to do with the arts network at all. It's just it needs better public transport in the whole country. Yeah. I think the reliance on having to drive to places to both see things and to do the work is the biggest, I think, roadblock in the way of people being able to work here. Is that I live in Plumpton and I'm on the A6 between Penrith and Carlisle, and there's a bus every hour and 10 minutes, I think, last time I checked, and it costs about £6. So that's like you can get flights to Seville from Manchester Airport for double that. It's one of those strange things where actually a lot of the infrastructure of the actual venues and the people making the work in Cumbria is there and getting better and getting more connected. But I think the real issue is the fact that there isn't the transport to be able to get people, which means, yeah, I know Lorna Singleton just said you have a bus. It's honestly, I feel very lucky that I even have that. It is one of those things that there is something about when I lived in Manchester that you could get a text from your mate being like, I'm going to home theatre this evening. I've got a spare ticket. Do you want to come? And I can walk in 20 minutes. I can get a tram, whatever. And I'm there. And then someone texting me being like, I'm going to go and see the show in Keswick. Do you want to come? Then I've got to jump in the car. I've got to drive that 40 minutes, half an hour, be there and then come back again. And there is a couple more walls in the way between that sort of being something that feels viable for people to do. I think the other thing is that I think we need, and obviously this is my pipe dream. I would love a new work producing theatre in both Penrith and Carlisle. They don't have that. They have, there is Penrith Players, and I think what they do is lovely, and it's I was involved in that when I was younger, but that's more sort of an Amjam sort of side of things. In Carlisle, you've got the Sand Centre, but that is touring shows, big musicals. It's not Cumbrian content necessarily, but the only real big producing theatre, I mean, again, I might get this wrong, but it feels like it's Theatre by the Lake. And they have historically in the past, they used to have a lot of work coming up from London. Now they're doing a lot of work to do some stuff that is really Cumbrian generated, which is lovely, really lovely to see. But there is, there's a sort of, it would be about trying to find spaces, and then not only spaces for performance, but spaces for rehearsal, to be able to build work in Cumbria rather than have to build work outside of Cumbria with its eyes on Cumbria.
Okay. All right. I think lots of nods of agreement when you said public transport. Finally, quickly, Patch. By the way, I think having the name Patch is probably a good way of being remembered by people as well. Is Ghost playing anywhere else if people can't get along on Tuesday?
I think we have one more night up in Edinburgh, if that is something that you were wanting to go to. Let me have a look. I'll go on their website.
And where did you do your degree, Patch?
I did it at the University of Manchester.
Right. Okay.
Which is where I met David Butler, who was fellow Cumbrian. In 1st of December at Capitol Theatres in Edinburgh is the other option. I'm hoping that we'll be able to bring it back. It is not a guarantee, as with all these sort of things, but it is a project that we're very excited about. So do keep your eyes peeled if it does come back again.
Okay, well, great to have you on the call this morning, Patch.
Well, thank you for having me.
In chat, some good thoughts from Virginia, some pragmatic, realistic thoughts from Virginia about public transport and financing as well. Virginia, of course, is a councillor at Westmoreland Furnace, amongst many other things. Great to have you, Patch. Stick around. And it's just really nice to always hear a sort of young person's perspective on things as well, which is why I asked you those questions. Good luck. And I hope you stick around in Cumbria and keep making stuff in Cumbria as much as you possibly can, because we need people like you, frankly, to do that kind of thing. Excellent. Right. Let's shift on to finding out about funding, speaking about funding and making things happen. Let's hear from Becca, who is, I suspect, I'm trying to find it on my screen. Where is she?
Hello, I'm here.
There she is. Are you in a car, Becca?
I am, yeah. It's the only private space I've got right now. So hello, everybody, and apologies for the terrible, not very scenic background, considering I'm on
Give us
the
a few minutes then on this funding hub that's coming up.
Yeah, so I'll keep it really, really short and sweet. So basically, we are starting up. We have the first meeting of a fundraising hub, and I think probably safe to call it the South Lakeland fundraising hub. We will be hosting it at Kendal Town Hall or 10:30 to 12. This to discuss kind of fundraising, creatives and practitioners that are having to do it all. And it's a space for us all to come together and just kind of have a lovely conversation, really, and talk about ideas, trends, opportunities, challenges, things that are niggling you right now, and really, I suppose, trying to help and support and empower each other to get through what is very competitive and challenging times of fundraising, and to look at all the great things that are still also coming out of it as well. And so I think we've got a few people booked on. I know there's more spaces available. And so really we're just saying, please book on. I think the link is on the main website, I think. So book via Eventbrite. And yeah, just come and have a chat. And I think this will be the start of, a semi regular kind of catch-up group, from what I understand.
Excellent. So just remind us of the time and the place again, Becca.
It'll be Kendal Town Hall. It is on Tuesday, the 28th of November, and it will be from 10:30 till 12. And just to, encourage / bribe people, we will be providing coffee, tea, and croissants as well. So come, bring your fundraising questions, bring your brain, And thank you very much to the network for setting this all up for us. It's something certainly I, as a fundraiser, have always hoped that we could be a bit more kind of collaborative and sharing. So it's fantastic the network has put this together.
Excellent. Well, I suspect Chris is the person that's made it all happen. So, Chris, you've got your hand up as well.
Yeah, just to throw in, so the rest of the region doesn't feel neglected. We will be setting up similar things in probably Carlisle and probably Barrow. So this is the kind of the southeast area, and we hope by kind of running 3 of them, there'll be places that everybody can get to. We had the training from Ian Tabron about Arts Council applications in Barrow and Carlisle, and sort of some informal chat after that, but we'll set up another croissant occasion fairly early in the new year in both of those places.
Okay, thank you. And Becca, this session is free, is that right? Croissants are just
it
magically
is,
appearing.
No, absolutely, absolutely free. Please do come along. We
Great,
look forward.
I think we should change the name of these sessions to the fundraising croissant. I think that would stay in people's mind.
I don't think that'll do any harm. Great. Thanks very much, Becca. I hope it goes well. So that's next Tuesday. These sessions are coming thick and fast. And a lot of this is as a result of the Arts Council successful bid that we made some months ago, which we've got, I think, through until the end of this financial year. So there'll be more sessions in the pipeline to come as well, as Chris has said. Thank you ever so much, Becca. Great to have you talking about that this morning.
Thank you.
Right. Let's go and talk now about Li Yuan-chia. I hope I've pronounced that roughly right. I may not have done. I used to live in Castle Carrick, which is just south of Brampton. And I had vaguely heard of this amazing sounding man who obviously died sometime before I moved there back in 2003. But, you know, it's one of these names and the work that was done there that has just sort of resonates, but actually has come to fruition much more very recently with a new exhibition that's kicked off at Kettle's Yard in Cambridge. So we have someone who's made a film about this and someone who knows a lot about it as well, Helen Petts and Aaron Tan. So Helen, I don't know where you are this morning. Aaron, I know, is in London. We've got a bit of film to watch and some slides to look at as well. And I really commend this amazing sounding man to you to find out more about. So Helen, over to you to tell us a bit more about this amazing sounding fella. Come off mute, Helen.
I was first approached about 10 years ago by a friend of Li Yuan-chia's called Paul Martin, who had seen another film I'd made about Kurt Schwitters. And I make films that are quite following a story and that explore the landscape, and that they're shown as installations in galleries. And it took me a few years to get around to actually thinking, yes, I want to make a film about Li. And it was commissioned. This film was commissioned by Manchester Art Gallery for an exhibition that took place just before COVID. And it included Li's work, but other artists who'd worked with. It was a big exhibition about other things. Actually, Li was a tiny bit of it, and my film was an installation in the gallery. But now this wonderful exhibition has happened at Cambridge at Kettle's Yard Gallery, and Aaron has been commissioned to make 3 new pieces that he has in the exhibition. But the majority of the exhibition is Li's own work, which has been a massive research job on the part of the curators. And my film is not in the main exhibition. It's going to be shown on the 26th of January, and I'm giving a talk about it. But I am now in London because I went back to I half live in Yorkshire, half live in London, and I went to Cambridge again yesterday, got the catalogue, which is wonderful. I've just been looking at it, and it's a really brilliant exhibition. There's also a feature film that's coming out for cinema release about Li, a documentary. So that's going to be premiered next week at the ICA in London.
So Helen, before we see a clip of your film, just for those people that don't know, what is the Cumbrian connection?
He went to live in. He came to the UK from China via Italy. He came to live in Cumbria in 1968, and he lived there for the rest of his life. And he bought a farmhouse from Winifred Nicholson, the painter, and intended to run it as a kind of community centre. He called it the LYC Museum. The building is still there. It's rather sad, but it's been turned into a posh house now. It's a building site at the moment. And he ran it where lots and lots and lots of artists got given their first exhibition, and some of those artists have gone on to become quite famous, like Andy Goldsworthy, David Nash, Sheila Wakely showed there. They're the people who are in the main part of the exhibition in Cambridge, and it's a really wonderful show, actually. But it was also, there were also classes in rug making, and there was lots of stuff for kids to do. And he got a bit of funding, but it was always a very hand-to-mouth thing. And he became a bit of a legend in the neighbourhood, I think. Kate Bundrup sent me a message yesterday saying people are talking about this who remember him, you know. So do you want to play the film? I mean, my film is my own very personal response, because I used to live on Hadrian's Wall on the other side of Carlisle, and yeah, I just fell in love with him, basically. I wanted to make a film about him.
Hello? Yes? Oh. The sun is good. The weather is beautiful. It is beautiful. Well, 1973, I start first extension, finish 1974.
I forgot to say, I was given permission by the Li Yuan-chia Foundation to use his own archive film footage. And I also spent quite a few weeks going through sound recordings and discovered that very, very ropey sound recording that he made himself, saying what he wanted to do. I decided to leave it as is and not try and clean it up too much, because it sounded like a Dalek when I cleaned it up. But yeah, thanks, Patch, for the comment on the sound. I love working with sound. That's what I do. I know David Butler as well, and he was in the Manchester exhibition. The pianist is Steve Beresford, who I asked to work. I've worked with him a lot, and he seemed relevant because of the Delia Derbyshire connection. Delia Derbyshire lived at the LYC Museum for about a year, and she left her piano behind. And the sound recordings that I searched through were just endless BBC contemporary classical music, John Cage and people like that. And it seemed appropriate to ask Steve to do some music for it. Thanks.
Great, thank you very much. So are we now cross to Aaron, who we've got some slides to show with Aaron as well. I think this, I've seen some other comments on social media about, wouldn't it be fantastic to get this exhibition to Cumbria somehow, and the sense that, as Laura's put there, we've not retained more of Lee's legacy in the county. I don't know what we can do about this. I don't know how long the exhibition is on in Cambridge for, etc., etc. Probably a conversation for another day. But I think there's this growing sense of interest in his work and what legacy he left here as well. But anyway, Aaron, over to you, and Amy will get your slides up and you can talk us through those. So welcome.
Great, thanks, Tom. Yeah, it's a shame that it's not traveling the show. It's really wonderful. Yeah, I was actually discussing it with my supervisor, Mark Wilson, yesterday, whether it could travel, but obviously that's sort of beyond our means. But it's something. If you guys could actually make it down to Cambridge, that'd be really great. The curators did a fantastic job. So I'll just sort of jump really quickly straight into the slides. But firstly, my name is Aaron Tan. I'm one of the artists participating in the Catter's Yard exhibition, which is entitled "Making New Worlds, Li Yuan-chia and Friends." I'm also a practice-led PhD student at the University of Cumbria, and I've been researching on the LYC Museum for the last 3 to 4 years. So I wanted to start with this image of Li, which is taken by Richard DeMarco in 1975. It's sort of one of the first rooms that a visitor would encounter in the LYC Museum, and it's basically a map of Hadrian's Wall. The curators of the exhibition at Catter's Yard, Amy Tobin, Hamad Nassar, and Sarah Victoria Turner, so I've asked if I could look at this image as a starting point into thinking about the commission at Catter's Yard, where the work would similarly be shown on a long wall that leads onto the main gallery spaces. And the question of place, I think, is key here, of placemaking as a kind of first introduction to Li's work. So next slide, please, Amy. So the image here on the left is the current state of the LYC building, which you could sort of seen in Helen's beautiful film, and obviously the building has been sold to a private owner and it's partially being demolished. And specifically, this is the kitchen of the LYC. It's opposite the windows would have been Li's kitchen cabinet, which he designed and constructed. You can see the image on the right. So I was very interested in the relationship between the window and the kitchen cabinet of the LYC, and how that can be sort of transposed into the Catter's Yard show. Next slide, please. So I'm showing two works in the exhibition. The first work is entitled Windows, which is a 3-part installation across Catter's Yard gallery extension, and plays with specific apertures and windows in the gallery space. So in a sense, modulating the flow of light, both artificial and natural, in the spaces. So here again, sort of returning to the questions of placemaking, thinking about Li and the afterlives of his museum, and how that could be reanimated, recirculated, or extended into the here and now, in the encounter of the works in the exhibition. Next slide, please, Amy. So the first movement of windows is situated in the welcome area of the gallery, which is kind of a hybrid multi-use space, which leads onto the main exhibition spaces, and also functions as a kind of a waiting area for visitors to Eads House. I don't know whether you guys are familiar with Cumbria, but there is a historic house, which is the house of the collectors, Jim Eads and Helen Eads, and it's a beautiful house in which they basically left instructions as to how they should be maintained after well, they basically donated it to the university, and so the house is basically preserved as it was, and it's full of wonderful objects and artworks. So anyway, going back to the exhibition, so the relationship to hospitality here was sort of very important. Li was a migrant artist who ended up playing host to other artists and makers, communities and families from near and far, with his museum in Banks, Cumbria. So one of the questions for this work was, how could we host Li today? So next slide, please, Amy. So the work essentially hosts one of Li's 8-mil film experiment, which you can sort of see on the right image. So where footage of his hanging mobiles were double exposed onto the landscape film from the LYC Museum, and I think the view would be of the Northern Pennines. Next slide, please. So if you actually if Amy, if you could click on it, I think there might be a video that plays. Not the sound. What you can see here is that the projection situates the museum in Bank, as well as sort of transposes it into the architecture of Cutters Yard in Cambridge, working as a light source that modulates with the changing light conditions from various apertures in the space. So alongside the film, a constellation of fabrics, materials, and objects is suspended in this porous holding environment. So this, the image on the right, is a kind of a printout of one of Li's diaries, and it says LYC opening, June, I think 1977. And it's kind of housed in a like tomato container. That's sort of a packaging that you find from a supermarket. Yeah, so if you could have the next slide, please. Yeah, so actually, can we return to the previous slide? So anyway, the sort of last comment about this particular work, it's kind of basically a makeshift screening room in a way, and it sort of tries to reroute how one might move in the space, and offers up sort of multiple perspectives, layers, and access points into Li's universe, assembled through my own personal effects and studio materials. Yeah, if you could move on to the next slide. So the next two movements of windows are situated on the first floor of the gallery and operates on very different registers. And in this case, I guess I was thinking of sort of evoking sort of hybridized landscape, such as like the man-made and the rural. And the next slide, please. And this one is more about domestic and intimate spaces. Could we have the next slide again, actually? Yeah, so there's more details of this particular installation. And so the sort of domesticity that I'm really interested in, sort of it's kind of a way into the second work for the exhibition, which is entitled Kitchen Cabinet. So next slide, please, Amy. So if windows is a porous work, a kitchen cabinet is more of a contained one, which sort of deals with the object. Kitchen cabinets are sort of inspired by Li's original design, which I showed earlier, which was installed in the kitchen of the LYC Museum, and where visitors could help themselves to a supply of tea and biscuits. So faithful to the scale of the cabinet's original door, the work opens up to, next slide, please. A sort of vitrine, basically, that hosts catalogs and a broadsheet from the LYC Press, which Li devoted a significant amount of his time to, alongside an economy of my own personal effects, works, pantry items, studio detritus, and fabric scraps. Next slide, please. There's a video actually on the left. Gives you a sense of so yeah, it sort of includes my film on Li's unrealized model of circus studio, which preceded the LYC Museum. The cabinet also references personal anecdotes, such as Li's technique of the one-pan meal, which Peter Pluck learned when he lived and worked at the LYC Museum as a young carpenter. Next slide, please. So yeah, this is basically, yeah, sort of some vignettes from the kitchen cabinet. But I was really thinking about like a speculative archive here, and thinking about like the architectural commons that the LYC Museum basically animated. Yeah, that's it really. Thank you. Sorry, there was a lot.
It's fascinating, absolutely fascinating, Aaron, and it sort of draws you in to want to find out. It draws me in to want to find out much more about him. Why is it so interesting? Why is he so interesting to you?
He is just such a, I guess, such an interesting radical figure in what I think in British art history. And I was just like, when I first encountered his museum or his work, there was very little on it, and only in the recent years really there has been a lot of momentum in sort of restoring some of that kind of legacy. But basically, Li had a sort of migratory kind of practice. He came from China. He fled during the Civil War and ended up in Taiwan. Went to Bologna in the 60s, and then ended up in London, and then sort of moved up to Cumbria and stayed there for the rest of his life. And the LYC Museum was really an artwork of his. And Li had his own personal concept of the cosmic point, which is very important to him. And in a way, the museum was the cosmic point, almost like the fulfillment of the cosmic point, in which people could participate in this kind of living museum, and where everyone was invited to be part of. So that was really kind of striking for me.
And Richard, you knew Li.
Yeah, I lived 2 miles away as a child, and I was able to go there, I would say probably once a week, when I was at primary school and into secondary school. The kitchen cabinet thing is so evocative, because actually one of the reasons we used to go was because you could get free biscuits. You could just rock up and help yourself to the biscuits in the cabinet, out of the cabinet. But was always artist materials. You could go and just create, and it was normal, and for a kid from a farming background that wasn't normal, but we just used to rock up. We would draw, we would paint. Delia Derbyshire would wander through. Winifred Nicholson's works were on the wall. I mean, it normalized art for me. That's what you did every day. Of course, every village in the arsehole of Britain had a museum like that. Of course they did. And it was just amazing. And there's images that you have of him with wheelbarrows. That's how I remember him. He was always working. He was always slogging. He was always doing something. And we were the ones having fun. We were the ones creating work and just reveling in it. And he was the one slogging his guts out to make it possible. And in some ways, I think seeing those images of the place as it is now, actually, I drove past yesterday with my father, and it's gone again. It's now becoming very much a house. It's lost all that sense, and I felt so nostalgic and sad. But in a way, you're right. The LYC museum was Lee, and Lee was the LYC museum. And actually, even if it had kept going, it would be a pale, pale, pale imitation of what it was in the glory days when Lee was there, because it was his artwork. You know, the publicity material and the posters he created were artworks, and it wouldn't be the same if anybody else created them. It would be like saying, you know, somebody moves into Picasso's studio and starts using it and drawing on Picasso's work. It was his artwork. Sorry, I honked on there. I apologize.
There's always space and time for you to honk whenever you want to, Richard. That's really just great to have that connection, that personal connection. It sounds like a sort of a childhood paradise for someone with creative juices who sounds like he was an amazing enabler, you know, an amazing empowerer. And I can see a debate going on in chat about how on earth we could get this up to some venue in Cumbria somewhere. I would encourage those people to continue that debate offline, perhaps, and see where we could go with that. I think the exhibition's on until, Aaron, is it on until February, did you say?
It is, yeah.
It is, and I believe there's possibly going to be some kind of symposium. It's not been officially decided yet, but that it'll be a closing event with some sort of symposium where people can get together and talk.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for bringing that to our attention and for sharing your beautiful art with us as well, Aaron. It's been really enlightening. And I just want to sort of make a little connection here to and Helen as well, to Celia now, because I kind of feel that another new gallery that's just opened in Cumbria, in Maryport, has enabled this amazing project for children. You know, we're kind of linking back to Richard saying how inspired he was as a child going to the LYC. Celia, we've got a few pictures and a few images to show as well. So in the last 5 minutes of the call, tell us about what you've been doing in Maryport.
Yeah, no, just building on what you're just saying, Tom, that's what Dolly and Brian have been doing with the Shipping Brow Galleries. It really echoes the work at Lee's place. So they've set up this gallery, and Dolly just seems to have a magic wand as far as I can tell, but she just goes, we're going to just work with all the schools and all the kids to get to know William Mitchell's work. So I was brought in to do that. And he's a Victorian maritime painter who came over from Northern Ireland, and he started to paint the engines to start with. And then he just started painting. The young children immediately sort of linked into, like, they could see that's where they were from, that's where they lived. So they completely sort of resonated, interestingly, with this Victorian painter. But I was more interested in an opportunity to work with that many children on the language of paint, because where we're up to with painting is not so much styles of any given period or any voice that comes through a certain type of painting, but it's more what's the grammar and language of paint. So I set up stations with different brushes, different materials, different palettes. There were bright palettes, landscape palettes, dark, dingy palettes of colour, different brushes, so that the material then spoke back to the children. So they could paint anything that was connected to Maryport, because that was the subject matter of William Mitchell. These are shots of when they then moved on to sort of look at specifically what were the rules of William Mitchell's style, because we kind of broke down what style is, and it's actually sometimes the fashionable rules of a period, because I wanted them to go away to develop their own styles. But that kind of co-creation process, where it's a shared sort of safe space where you negotiate really a shared vision, a way to look into the future through a painting. And that was just really beautiful to see that in action. Many times over, there was just, I've lost count, it's like 2 solid months with 8 schools, and there were 3 workshops in each schools. And these little pods of 5 kids each would be sort of working on those shared pieces of work. And I just wrote too much in this PowerPoint, so I'll just ignore it. But basically, there's going to be a show in St Mary's Church in Maryport on Monday. It's going to get, so there's all these 40 works and then bound books containing 960 small works. And really, it's like a portrait of Maryport, because it's how children see themselves, how they understand themselves, where they live. It's a portrait and a social document of how Maryport has got together with an organisation like the Shipping Brow Gallery, the city town council, various other hosting organisations have got together to basically give the children, the future custodians of that town, the idea to investigate their identity, their history, through paint, and so articulate it in material form. So I do recommend you go and see it. It's then moving to the settlement after that for 3 days. So it's all happening next week. But it's just yummy in terms of a encyclopedic sort of document of mark making, as well as a portrait of them.
Fantastic. As Chris has said, I think in chat, some amazing images from those children. You've obviously inspired them, Celia.
Yeah, well, I tell you what, honestly, I was falling over myself. I honestly couldn't believe that the staff and the children, I don't know, I wasn't, it just all sort of came out of them. We just basically, we carpeted, on all the walls, we put on lots of images of Maryport town, just to sort of soak into them. But they kind of got the William Mitchell thing, and I'd get children to come up to the front of the class and we'd demo that idea of the language of how paint moves over different surfaces, how it, different types of brushes. And they kind of, and what I do is when a child has shown to the other kids that you can do it, then they all knew they could do it. So and then of course we had Chloe Maitland, who was helping, who's training to be art college teacher, but we also had Felix Butterwick, who's artist in residence for the year. So I did drop him in a bit where I kind of went, oh, Felix, could you just, these children have trouble drawing a train, can you just do that in front of lots of kids? So but yeah,
great stuff.
Honestly, it was an amazing atmosphere. So yeah, I hope you guys can come see it next week.
Yeah, and just join strands together. Andrew's kind of thought of the morning. It occurs to me that given Patch's reference to public transport and the environmental emergency, Lee's museum would be a model for the arts in Cumbria. Each town or village has an exceptional artist who lives and works there and hefts to the place. I think that's a really interesting concept and thing to think about. If anyone's going to do something about that kind of thing, I suggest it's this network. There's some good stuff to ponder over the weekend as we perhaps enjoy our county and think about the legacy that artists like Lee have left us, but also artists, that are now finding a whole new life, however old they are, in Maryport, with a new gallery there. So thank you very much to everyone for this morning's fascinating hour. Thank you to Patch for telling us his story, for Becca for reminding us that you need money to sometimes get to do this stuff and how we can help to do that. And well done to the network for pulling all that together. Helen and Aaron for a fascinating insight into a man who's becoming a bit more well-known now and who left a tremendous legacy in that small corner of northeast Cumbria. And Celia for showing us how children are all connected to this as well, and how perhaps with art we should never ignore the small people who do extraordinary stuff with a little bit of provocation perhaps and a little bit of support. So it's been a really great hour. Thank you to everybody for contributing as well. Next week, by the way, we're going to hear from Claire Malcolm, who's the Chief Exec of New Writing North, who wrote a fascinating piece in Arts Professional that I spotted about 6 weeks ago about how she's made her organisation a climate zero organisation. And so we're going to talk about that and how you can influence organisations perhaps. And also Sam Hunt from Creative People and Places, the We Are Here project in West Cumbria. They're setting up some citizens' assemblies in the new year. So he's going to talk to us a bit about how they're going to try and go about that and what the impact of that could be for the way that perhaps arts and culture takes place in the west of Cumbria over the next few years. So that is the plan for next week. Thanks all.
Can I just interrupt
Kate.
Tom and say thank you to Tom for such a great morning? Wasn't that a good one? And each week it takes effort to put together, but this one was particularly good. So thank you, Tom, for everything you do.
Thank you, Kate. That's very kind.
Thank you.
Lovely to see you all. Have a great weekend and a great week. See you all again soon. Thanks.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Have a good weekend.